Tonight, protesting Supreme Court justices.
It is a criminal offense to protest at the home of a judge.
As demonstrations continue outside the homes of those sitting on the high court, some say enough is enough. Plus,
very devastating seeing the house you grow up in, get washed away.
The latest on deadly flooding in Kentucky. And
I never would have thought that dying would be so peaceful and pleasant.
How hospice care can be a valuable tool for those facing the end of life. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
It is the right to protest versus the right to privacy as abortion advocates target the homes of members of the High Court. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm Tara Mergener.
And in Washington, I'm Matt Gelka. Protests outside the home of conservative Supreme Court justices continue for more than a month after the decision overturning Roe v. Wade. While the crowds draw attention, so far law enforcement agencies have not seen a need to intervene.
But a new poll shows a majority of American voters believe abortion rights advocates have gone too far. National security correspondent Caitlin Burke joining us now with tonight's top story. Caitlin, these ongoing protests are really quite organized, aren't they?
They are. Protesters keep a consistent weekly agenda. Wednesday night marches at the home of Justices Kavanaugh and Roberts. Thursday nights, Justice Barrett. Fridays, Justice Thomas. And Saturdays, Alito. As state, local, and federal lawmakers argue over whose job it is to deal with them, those marching vow no privacy for us, no peace for you. After nearly 3 months, the protests show no sign of ending.
What do we want? Abortion rights.
A recent poll shows a majority of American voters don't approve of the protests outside the homes of Supreme Court justices. 61% of registered voters saying this kind of protest undermines democracy. 58% want Attorney General Merrick Garland to enforce a federal law prohibiting them.
There's a federal statute designed to protect not just judges and justices, but also prosecutors and witnesses in federal court and in federal trial.
While Garland initially helped the justices get around-the-clock security, there's been only silence since then from the Justice Department. At the beginning of July, the U.S. Supreme Court Marshal called on governors in Virginia and Maryland to enforce state and local laws regarding this picketing. Both governors pointed back to the federal government. In a statement to CBN News, Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin's spokesperson said, quote, Governor Glenn Youngkin has been working with state and local officials and holds the justices' safety as an utmost priority. Governor Youngkin has asked for every resource of federal law enforcement, including the U.S. Marshals, to be involved. He has requested that the Attorney General of the U.S. should do his job by enforcing the much more robust federal law. Youngkin and Maryland Governor Larry Hogan have encouraged enforcement of local laws as well. And a few weeks ago, the Montgomery County Police Department announced it would begin arresting protesters who violate the disturbing the peace or disorderly conduct statutes.
Our adjustments are being made in response to community complaints and things that folks that have come out have done.
Noise amplifying devices, if it's amplifiers, speakers, bullhorns, those types of things, playing loud music, that's where we're saying, okay, we need you to not bring these things. You can still come, you can still, protest, but you can't use these noise amplifying devices.
When it comes to the legal question of stopping these protests and who can do it, First Amendment expert Hans von Spakovsky says both the state and federal governments have a role to play here.
Not only is there a federal statute that prevents this, but for example, in Virginia, where several of the justices live, there's a state statute on this also that protects the tranquility and peace of people's neighborhoods where they live. That is fully in accord with the First Amendment.
Amid the ongoing protests and national unrest, Justice Clarence Thomas is stepping down as a law lecturer at George Washington University. While Thomas has not commented on his decision, a petition to have him relieved of the role recently garnered over 11,000 signatures. Matt?
Well, Caitlin, justices usually let their written opinions do their talking, but have we heard from any of them since the Roe ruling or the response to it from abortion rights advocates?
Justice Samuel Alito commented on the ruling during a speech last week at a religious liberty summit in Rome. He acknowledged there's been a lot of backlash, not only here in the U.S., but around the world.
I had the honor this term of writing, I think, the only Supreme Court decision in the history of that institution that has been lambasted by a whole string of foreign leaders who felt perfectly fine commenting on American law. One of these was former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, but he paid the price.
Only 4 other countries have rolled back abortion rights since 1994: El Salvador, Nicaragua, and Poland. Matt, Tara?
Caitlin, thank you. President Biden's agenda got a pretty big boost this week.
With the president's poll numbers low, some wins on Capitol Hill were needed for an administration that's seen many policy initiatives stalled. The Senate and House passed new semiconductor legislation now heading to the president's desk. That measure provides roughly $52 billion in funding for U.S. companies to produce the chips here at home. Another win this week for the White House, a deal between Senator Joe Manchin and Majority Leader Chuck Schumer on a spending measure that tackles inflation, healthcare, and energy concerns. Here with us now, Julia Manchester, political reporter for The Hill. Julia, so how important was it for the president to get these wins on Capitol Hill this week?
Oh, it was absolutely so important, Tara. We know that going into the midterms, particularly in the House, Democrats are really poised to suffer catastrophic, potentially, gains, and Republicans could take back the majority. But I think you've heard Senator Manchin say it in particular. He was able to, team up with Schumer on this because, there was a chance that Democrats could lose the Senate as well. And he wanted to see how far they could go and what they could get done in the case that they do lose the Senate in November. So Joe Manchin, very much, that wild card in Washington. We know he's gone against his own party in the past, notably last December during those Build Back Better negotiations. But now it's ironically Republicans saying they feel betrayed by Joe Manchin, saying this was done behind their back with a lack of communication.
Well, it really seemed like Biden's administration needed this boost. The latest figures show the president is facing his worst approval rating since taking office. As a matter of fact, a recent Quinnipiac University poll found only 31% approve of the president's job performance, while 60% disapprove. Julia, can the president overcome these low numbers? And if so, how can he do it?
It's going to be very difficult for him to overcome these low numbers, especially when there are a lot of economists who predict that we are inching or nearing towards a recession. We're already seeing inflation growing. The economy is shrinking. And I think you're really seeing that play out in the polls for President Biden, whether, you believe it's his fault directly or not. Americans are essentially blaming him and Democrats. But this is a piece of legislation that he can point to. Now, they still need to get Arizona Democratic Senator Kyrsten Sinema, another, wild card Democrat on board, to pass this. But I think Democrats right now in Biden want to be able to point to these victories, and they really haven't had a lot of victories recently. I mean, there was the infrastructure bill in November, the American Rescue Plan in the beginning of 2021. So they need victories that are fresh in voters' minds, that voters are feeling when they go to the polls.
Julia, this week we saw the deal between Senator Joe Manchin and on broad spending measure called the Inflation Reduction Act. We've been talking about that. The agreement seen as a reversal for Manchin, maybe a flip-flop. Why do you think the change of heart?
I think a lot of it has to do with the midterms. I mean, we heard Senator Manchin talking about how, there's a chance that Democrats could end up losing the Senate. They don't know what the political environment is going to look like. So I think Senator Manchin decided to, go with his home team in this case and, decided to hop on board with a lot of this legislation. We've heard Manchin very much pushing for anti-inflation measures, and it seems like he's got it this time.
Well, Julia Manchester from the Hill, thank you so much. It's great to see you as always. All right, well, coming up, from floods to fires, a look at the wild weather facing the United States. Next on Faith Nation.
Welcome back. President Biden today declaring a major disaster in Kentucky. Flooding has been so fierce their homes have been washed away from their foundations, forcing thousands to run for higher ground. At least 16 people are dead tonight after torrential rains devastated parts of eastern Kentucky Thursday, and that death toll could still rise. Fast rising water turned creeks into gushing rapids and roadways into rivers. Some families were forced to rooftops to be rescued, and thousands were sent to shelters.
Asking everybody to pray. There's a lot of people out there who need help, who are really scared right now. And we're doing the very best we can to reach each and every one of them.
We know we've got folks now that we just can't get to them because the water is so swift.
Everything's gone, everything is gone.
Devastating. The National Weather Service now calling for even more rain.
Well, if it feels like you've been sweating a little bit more, you're probably not alone. Most of the country has been under excessive heat warnings, and the Pacific Northwest is on the verge of shattering record temperatures. Parts of Oregon and Washington could see highs touching 115 degrees this weekend. That's about 10 to 15 degrees above average in some spots. Part of the concern is access to air conditioning in an area of the country where many homes don't have it. Forecasters say that heat wave could make its way across the country next week. And firefighters in California and Idaho are still battling fires spanning thousands of acres. The U.S. Forest Service says Idaho's Moose Fire had spread more than 40,000 acres so far, and that it is only 15% contained. And in California, officials say progress has been made on a forest fire near Yosemite National Park. The Oak Fire in Mariposa County has spread to more than 18,000 acres. Latest reports show it's 36% contained. At least 100 houses and structures have been destroyed. Officials are still investigating the cause of the blaze.
Well, does hospice hasten death? An in-depth look at end-of-life care when Faith Nation returns. Welcome back. Facing death is difficult for those in the position and their families. In the final weeks or months, end-of-life care can help either at home or at healthcare facilities.
Hospice can help relieve pain and provide relief from anxiety. Medical reporter Lori Johnson explains what hospice care involves, and addresses some of the misconceptions about the service.
Hospice is wonderful.
Andrea and Bill Garrett felt heartbroken to learn he didn't have much time left on this side of eternity.
The doctor said to us that he had stage 4 cancer. It was terminal. Bill understood that. It was terminal. And he said that any further treatment would only make him miserable, and it wouldn't necessarily even extend his life. So with that understanding, we together made the decision to just go home.
Andrea said Bill's final days were actually a good experience for everyone.
He wasn't in pain, and he actually said to me 2 days before he died, he said, I never would have thought that dying would be so peaceful and pleasant.
Hospice had a lot to do with it. A hospice team seeks to provide the highest quality of life possible for the family and the patient whose doctor says they have less than 6 months to live and is no longer being actively treated. Hospice teams go wherever the patient is, at home or a healthcare facility.
There's a lot of misinformation out there, and there's a lot of things that people think hospice is about that it really isn't about.
For example, accepting hospice care doesn't demonstrate a lack of faith.
I think that we as a culture have this collective state of denial over death. We don't want to believe that it's coming, and we don't want to accept it because it seems like when you choose hospice that you're just giving up on the person. And we always want to, as Christians, I believe we want to have hope, and we want to hold out for that miracle. But I think if we're thinking clearly, we would know that if God's going to do a miracle, he can do a miracle in hospice just as well as he can do a miracle when you're doing active, invasive treatment.
Some think hospice hastens death when research shows people actually live about a month longer in hospice compared to people with similar health issues who didn't choose it. Another common misconception is that people in hospice are heavily medicated with morphine.
We start all of our patients on a very, very low dose of morphine. It's usually a liquid morphine.
Hospice workers teach family members to administer the drug as needed, pointing out that a little bit of morphine often invigorates people by loosening the muscles that tend to tighten around the lungs of the elderly and critically ill.
So imagine trying to breathe and someone is squeezing your ribs. It's painful, it's difficult, and if you're weak already, it's really hard to get that deep breath in. Morphine relaxes smooth muscle, so it helps those muscles relax so your loved one can take a big deep breath. It also extends the life of oxygen, so oftentimes you think morphine is going to make your loved one feel sleepy and drowsy and sedated. A low dose of morphine will actually give them energy.
Hospice workers frequently provide another drug, lorazepam, to control anxiety and spasms.
There's something at the end of life called terminal agitation, and that can happen. And lorazepam relieves that so the patient can rest. Their legs aren't all over the place.
The hospice team helps families access resources many don't realize they have, which are 100% paid for by Medicare.
We cover all of the medications related to the hospice diagnosis and any symptoms that need managed. All of that is paid for. We give them a little pharmacy card and they go and we pay for that. And we cover equipment. So if your loved one needs oxygen, we don't have to jump through hoops to get oxygen. We put that in the home. We can do hospital beds, low air loss mattresses if they need them, wheelchairs. Any medical equipment that is needed, we can put that in the home as well. And it's all covered. There's no copay.
Chaplains counsel families and the dying person even when it seems like they can't hear, because that sense is the last to go.
What happens when someone comes to the end of their life, even if they are believers, many times people will still have, at that moment, will have doubts. They'll ask questions about eternity. They'll ask questions about their own salvation, and we're able to speak to them and reassure them that God is definitely with them at this moment. God would not leave them or forsake them. So that brings a lot of comfort, not only to them, but also to their families.
Have you found a lot of people who accepted Jesus on their deathbed?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. We often will have people who have actually had moments of conversion on their deathbed. Our ministers are really great. Our chaplains are really great at speaking the truth to folks. And of course, they hear the things that we're saying, and many have come to put their faith in Christ because of that.
Hospice workers observe most of the dying process is spiritual.
In those last days, it's not uncommon for people to see maybe children they've lost, parents that have gone ahead, close friends, close family members. And that alone to me has totally affirmed my faith. I know that my loved ones are waiting for me.
Have you ever seen or heard people talking to God or Jesus?
Mm-hmm. Oh, we had a family that the patient was speaking to Jesus as if he was right there.
So while caring for a terminally ill loved one can be overwhelming, especially at home, hospice can walk you through it.
Because I think a lot of times people are afraid that they won't be able to do it. They won't know what to do. They've never been with a person who is dying. They've never witnessed a person passing away, that's very daunting and it's very difficult. And so you need somebody who can help you, encourage you that you can do it.
Hospice even offers grief counseling for more than a year after the death.
You know, it goes on for a long time, and you could reach different stages of that, of coping with what has happened. So it was very helpful to just talk for an hour or so every month or every few weeks, however you want it. They're there for you. And that helps a lot.
And while no one likes the idea of needing hospice care, those who use it often say it was so helpful, they wish they'd started it sooner. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
To learn more about hospice care, you can watch the entire interview with Hospice Administrator Jessica Pope, who was featured in that story. Just go to cbnnews.com.
Well, coming up, trading in suits and ties for balls and strikes. America's lawmakers get in the game, all for a good cause. We explain next.
I am Region's first ROTC graduate student.
Well, finally tonight, here in Washington, it's pretty much Republicans versus Democrats. And last night, the parties took their fight to the field, all to raise money for charity.
A D.C. tradition dating back to 1909. Lawmakers from both sides of the aisles suiting up for the annual congressional baseball game. Of course, players had to wait out a brief weather delay in the fourth inning, but that didn't stop them from finishing the game, though perhaps Democrats would have preferred a rainout. Republicans taking home the victory a second year in the row in a 10-0 blowout. And not only did the GOP win big, so did local D.C. charities. The bipartisan baseball game saw record high ticket sales and donations this year, raising more than $1.7 million for area charities. I had really, honestly, no idea it raised that much money.
It's for a great cause, and I have a lot of feelings on this game. If I was in Congress, you would never hear the end of this game from me. I would make floor speeches about the game. You would not want to play against me. I'll just say that. I get really into it.
Beware. That's going to do it for Faith Nation. Have a great weekend. We'll see you Monday.